I want to talk about the president's summit that he just had on families and all the hypocrisy surrounding the topic. Because President Obama spoke about it on his weekly radio address on Saturday, kind of promoting this summit on families where the government was going to try to help solve all these problems that working families have. Of course, the irony of it is every problem they're trying to solve was created by government. That before government interfered, these problems didn't exist. But every problem they're trying to cure has a government-created cause. Yet they can't see that. Right? And so now they're trying to undo the damage that other programs have done without attributing the damage to the program. They're just saying it's just something that's happening naturally as a consequence of economic progress or something, that all these problems are happening. They can't link, they can't connect the dots between the problem and the government programs that created them. But here's a listen to the president's radio address. The first cut I have is number 3.
As president, my top priority is rebuilding an economy where everybody who works hard has the chance to get ahead. It's what I'll spend some time talking about on Monday at the White House Summit on Working Families. We're bringing together business leaders and workers to talk about the challenges that working parents face every day and how we can address them together. Take paid family leave. Many jobs don't offer adequate leave to care for a new baby or an ailing parent, so workers can't afford to be there when their family needs them the most. That's wrong, and it puts us way behind the times.
First of all, number one, the government can't mandate that employers provide leave without employers reducing the pay to make up the difference. I mean, employees are free to ask their employers to give them more leave. I mean, they can negotiate that. I mean, that could be part of the bargaining process. If an employee is willing to accept lower pay in exchange for greater leave, many employers would be willing to accommodate. It's just that you can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't have the same pay as somebody who doesn't take leave, but then take leave. So it's one or the other. And if the government mandates leave, then you're going to get a pay cut someplace else. You're going to lose something to gain something, because they can't just create value out of nothing. If your productivity is X, they can't mandate that you earn X plus Y. So if they're going to say you got to get paid in leave, well, then you're going to get less of something else. But the bigger problem is, he says, well, how do you take care of a new baby? Well, how did people take care of new babies before the government got involved? Well, the mother took care of the babies because the mother didn't have a job. But why are all the moms with young babies in the workforce? Because their husbands are paying so much in taxes that they're forced to work. Because the government is now so big and so expensive that the taxes are so high on the working spouse that the parenting spouse, the spouse that is taking care of the children, can no longer stay at home to take care of the children. See, this problem didn't exist when one paycheck was enough to support a family. The reason that one paycheck is no longer enough to support a family is because now your paycheck has to support lots of families on welfare, food stamps, and Social Security, and all sorts of other government programs. So now you're not just working to support your family, you're working to support lots of families. And because you can't afford to support lots of families, well, your wife has to get a job, and now there's nobody to take care of the baby when the baby is sick. This is all about government. And, of course, had the government not destroyed the value of the dollar through inflation, the dollars that the dads used to earn went a lot further, and it was easier to support the mom and all the babies that she was able to take care of. And, of course, even if you had a working mom, before the government screwed it all up with welfare and labor laws and all this, it was very easy to hire a full-time housekeeper, a full-time nanny. Just about any two-income household today, had we had the same amount of government as we had in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, just about any two-income family would be able to support a full-time live-in nanny. It wouldn't be very expensive at all because middle-class people, even without the wife working, could afford these things at one time in America. So certainly, if you've got two people working, affording full-time live-in help would be very simple but it can't be afforded now because of government programs. Here's some more. Cut number 4.
Only 3 countries in the world report that they don't offer paid maternity leave. 3. And the United States is one of them. It's time to change that. A few states have acted on their own to give workers paid family leave, but this should be available to everyone because all Americans should be able to afford to care for a family member in need.
Remember, governments can't give anybody paid leave. Employers have to provide paid leave in lieu of some other benefit that workers prefer. You see, when the government's talking about giving you something, what they're really talking about is restricting your choices. What Obama wants to do is force an employer to provide you with paid leave, even if you prefer to be compensated in some other manner. Because if the government comes out with a requirement that employers provide paid leave, well, then you have to get the paid leave, whether you want it or not. And so what's going to happen is that your pay is going to have to be reduced so that you can qualify for paid leave. And you know what a lot of people are going to do with their paid leave? They're going to get a part-time job. They're going to get a temporary job so they can earn back the money that they're no longer paid because the government forced their employer to give them a paid leave. So because they got paid leave, they got a cut in their pay, and now they have to make it up by getting another job. So basically that's what they're going to use their leaves for, to moonlight and get a second job to make up for all the income they lost because the government gave them a free paid leave. But do they have leave? No, they're working. And maybe they'll be working at a lower paying job than the one they're taking a leave from, which they don't even want. But now the government says you have to take it whether you want it or not because we want to pretend we're giving you something for nothing so that you'll vote for us.
Peter Schiff is back on the air.
We're talking about President Obama's his summit on working families. And, of course, he doesn't realize the reason that families are working so hard, the ones that still actually have jobs, is because they're working to support the government and they're working to support families that are the beneficiaries of government programs rather than their own families. Once upon a time in America, when we didn't have the welfare state, we didn't have a gigantic government, we had a free market system, families just supported themselves, and it was very easy to do. In fact, families supported themselves so well that if other family members or extended family members had problems, they could rely on their family for support. Today, if you run into difficulty, chances are your family members are tapped out too. They're maxed out on their credit cards. They have lots of debt, and they can't help you out either. So you're kind of on your own. The government has made it that everybody is now so broke that the only person you can look to for help in your need is the government, which I guess is exactly the way the government wants it, because then they can count on your vote. Here is a little bit more of President Obama, cut number 5.
Childcare is another challenge. Most working families I know can't afford thousands a year for childcare, but often that's what it costs. That leaves parents scrambling just to make sure their kids are safe while they're at work. Forget about giving them the high-quality early childhood education that helps the kid succeed in life.
Well, there's 2 points here. Number one, why do so many parents need childcare in the first place? That's because both parents are working. And why are both parents working? Because government is so big and taxes take so much of their paychecks that both parents now have to work. At one time in America, before we had all this government, both parents didn't have to work, and so childcare wasn't an issue. And to the extent it was an issue, because of the lack of the labor laws that are existing today, it was much easier to hire help. And of course, you didn't have to compete with welfare. If people wanted a job, they would accept the wages that you could afford instead of thumbing their nose at you because they got a better deal from the government and they don't have to do any work. But also, why is childcare so expensive? Why is these daycares? And that's because the government requires all these licenses. So if you want to provide daycare, let's say you're a mom who doesn't have a job, and a lot of the other moms in your community all work, and they're all putting their kids in daycare. Let's say you decide that, hey, why don't you just drop your kid off at my house, and I'll watch them, and pay me a third of what you're paying your current daycare, and I'll watch your kids until you get home. See, that would be illegal, because you have to have a license. You have to be a licensed daycare provider before you can offer services, for money. And since most people aren't going to do that for free, then you have, a lot of situations where households could have affordable daycare, but because of government licensing requirements, then the daycare is very expensive and very unaffordable. So you have government creating the problem, the need for daycare in the first place, and then government making daycare more expensive than it would ordinarily be if we had a free market. But of course, if we had a free market, we wouldn't even need the daycare in the first place. So there's no end to the way the government creates problems. And of course, their solutions aren't going to solve the problems. They're going to make them worse. Here's more Obama cut number 6.
Then there's the issue of flexibility, the ability to take a few hours off for a parent-teacher conference or to work from home when your child is sick. Most workers want it, but not enough of them have it. What's more, it not only makes workers happier, studies show that flexibility can make workers more productive and reduce worker turnover and absenteeism. And that's good for business.
So in other words, all the businessmen who are not giving their employees more sick days and more flexibility are just shooting themselves in the foot. Because if they were only as smart as President Obama and they did this for their workers would be more productive and they would make a bigger profit. See, how did President Obama, who's never run a business in his life, who's never done anything besides community organizer, how is President Obama so much more business savvy than all these other entrepreneurs that have been running businesses their entire lives? Or the arrogance of somebody like Obama, because he thinks he knows more about how to run everybody's small business than the guy who's currently running it. If they were only smart enough just to give their workers more sick days. You know what happens when you give your workers more sick days? They call in sick more often. That's it. But of course, if you're going to give your workers more sick days, you got to give them less pay. That's the truth that Obama doesn't want to reveal. They can give you something with their right hand, but then they take it away from you with their left hand. And again, of course, back before we had two people working, you had the mother that would be able to go to all the PTA meetings, right? We talked about the Brady Bunch, where Alice didn't have a job and she had a housekeeper, so she didn't have to do housework because it was inexpensive to hire housekeepers. So what did Alice do? What did Carol do? She went to PTA meetings. She worked at charitable events. She was very active in her community because she didn't have to spend all of her time working and doing housework. That's what they have to do now, thanks to the United States government. I think we have time for one more cut, number 7.
At a time when women make up about half of America's workforce, outdated workplace policies that make it harder for mothers to work hold our entire economy back. But these aren't just problems for women. Men also care about who's watching their kids. They're rearranging their schedules to make it to soccer games and school plays. Lots of sons help care for aging parents, and plenty of fathers would love to be home for their new baby's first weeks in the world.
Instead of trying to figure out how to make it easier for mothers to work, how about making it easier for mothers not to have to work? What about all the mothers out there that would rather be at home with their kids, who don't want a job, who don't feel liberated because they have some crappy, low-paying job, but they have no choice, but because they have to work because otherwise they couldn't pay the bills because their husband's taxes are so high? How about if we find a way to get rid of all this government so all these women with young children don't have to work in the first place? Instead of trying to solve this government-created problem with more government that's only going to make the problem worse, why don't we get the government out of the way? Why don't we let the free market liberate these women so they don't have to go and work, that they can stay at home with their children if that's what they choose, and then all these other so-called problems will just go away?